Hello world, my name is Klaus Hostel, and I'm doing 100 innovation keynotes in 100 days. Today's number 96, and today I'm going to tell you an innovation story about how we moved to an island. First off, today I'm going to talk about our new house. This is the place. And actually right now as I'm recording this, I am right there. The picture and the arrow on the picture show you where my office is. Let's start with a question though. What defines innovation? Could it be a new business model? Could it be a new training method? Could it be a new sales funnel? Could it be a new place to live? New place to work? Well, there's a nice quote that I really like about innovation that might provide an answer. Innovation is taking two things that exist and putting them together in a new way. The quote's by Tom Freston, perhaps best known as the founder of MTV. In other words, yes, moving to a new place can be innovation. In the fall of 2020, Sue Saga and I moved. We relocated. We left our old life behind and went somewhere else. We left this view for this view. We left this city for this town, this village. We left the capital of Copenhagen with 1.6 million people in the greater Copenhagen area, and we moved to the tiny island of Bornholm in the Baltic Sea, to the town of Nexø with 3,700 people. Now, that's a pretty crazy move. We're talking about moving to an urban sprawl that is the easternmost in the country, yes, but it's also 1/400th of the size of Copenhagen, roughly. I'm sharing this not just because I want to talk about our house and my life, but as an example of innovation in practice. What does that mean? It means that before we had 3 rooms and a kitchen. That's why I call it 3+1 rooms, like one function room. We had 80 square meters. Of course, we had a bathroom as well, but not interesting here. We had 80 square meters, nicely sized. We didn't have a garden. There was a yard you could go down into, but we didn't have a garden. We had very much an urban lifestyle. We had bikes, the metro was nearby, there were buses, we both had kind of the regular cards for that sort of thing, a lot of walking. We had no money. I mean, we of course paid rent, yada yada, but this was not a place we owned, we just rented, and pretty cheaply. Now, we have 4 rooms and 2 function rooms. We have a kitchen and something called a borgas, like a little bit of a utility room, an extra place where you put all the mess. There's the washing machine and the freezer and the heating system and all that sort of stuff. But we now have an extra room as well, apart from that. We have 132 square meters, so our size of kind of house or of dwelling has gone up quite a bit. Plus we have all sorts of extra space outside. There's a garage and there's sheds and there's like a small greenhouse. Space. We've got a big garden. Not huge, but pretty big. And we now have a village life. Very much not big city life. We still have no money. Such is life. That hasn't changed. So this is not a change from cheap to more expensive or expensive to cheaper. Money-wise, it's more or less the same. What does that mean for our organization, our small trio, which consists of me, Sue, and our daughter Saga, who is 3. So there are some pluses to this new setup. A lot of pluses, actually. One of them is we have a garden. We didn't have any before, and having a garden of your own, the luxury that is crazy. I was lucky enough to grow up. Most of my youth, I lived in a small town called Roskilde, where my parents had a house, and there was a garden. It's luxury, especially when you're a kid. Having one as an adult, I haven't had that before. Lived in apartments all of my adult life. It's wild. Going out into your own garden, putting up a swing for Saga, seeing Sue mow the lawn, look at the plants. It's lovely. We have a lot more space. We went from 80 to 132, And that's without counting the outside sheds and the garage and kind of the extra spaces we have. The house is just so much bigger than the apartment was. Our main living room, our main living space, I want to call it, but it's one big room, is about twice the size. And this is relevant because even if we had moved to a bigger place, but spent all our time in a living room that was about the same size, well, then you wouldn't notice as much. But here we've moved from our kind of our central space where we are most of the time together. That's twice the size it was before. And that's crazy. It makes a huge difference. We also now have this borgas, this pantry, this utility room, this extra kind of space for all the mess, which is lovely. It's a function that apartments rarely have, but many houses have them, where you kind of cram all of the kind of not pretty stuff, the wet clothes, the dryer, the kind of the cleaning stuff, all these sorts of things usually go there. We now have one. It's lovely. We also now have our own offices, Sue and I. We both have a big office each. Really, really nice. Before, we had a shared office. It was quite small. It was functional, but it was quite small. Now, I have a pretty big office, and Sue has a huge office. And that means that when we're working, we can do it together. I have space enough in my office that I have a guest working table for when she sits here and works with me if we're doing a project together. But we can also just do things apart. Super, super nice, especially from a working point of view. The Baltic Sea is 250 meters away from our front door. You walk out the front door, and in a few minutes, you are at the sea. And you gaze east, and there's nothing but open ocean. That is wild. Before, we lived in Copenhagen. It was a port city. Sure, but we didn't exactly live near the ocean. Yes, we lived in a port city, but we didn't live near the ocean, not even close to it. And we could get to it, but what we could get to was big, kind of developed, urban seaside. And we could go further. We could go, there was some beachfront, that sort of thing, but it was quite the trip to get there. Now, 250 meters away from our front door, there is a small pier, and the kayak club has a house there, an organization clubhouse. And then there's just the ocean. That is wild. Another plus is that Bornholm, for those of you who don't know it, because why should you? It's a tourist paradise. It's one of Denmark's leading tourist destinations. It's called the Sunshine Island in Denmark, and it has roughly 200 extra hours of sunshine compared to the national average. If you think about that for a moment, that's 25 days with 8 hours more sunlight than the national average. And in a place like Denmark, you can feel that because we're not California, we're not southern Italy. We are not getting like insane amounts of sun. So getting that extra kind of almost a month of sunshine, that matters. Also, it's a place where people go on vacation. So we have, within 10 minutes driving, we have a really, really nice beach. Within 15 minutes driving, we have one of the best beaches in Denmark. We have all sorts of interesting natural stuff and small town living. It's a little bit like stepping into an H.C. Andersen story, or like an old painting from the 1800s sometimes, when you're kind of going around in these small towns here on Bornholm. And one of the nice things about that is that where normally when you are at a tourist destination, you need to move, you need to go, you need to do it, because you might be there a week, you might be there maybe 2 weeks, but it's like you need to go now because tomorrow there's another plan. And the people who go on a trip for a week and just spend 2 days resting, that's rare. Some do it. I admire those people, but it's rare. We're here. When we're on the way to the supermarket, we can say, oh, why don't we just go visit this beach? Or why don't we go to this forest where there are bison, wild bison, in a place called the Bison Forest? We can just do that. It's 15 minutes from our house. And if we don't do it today, we can do it tomorrow or maybe next week. And that creates a completely different feeling. We also now have a car. We did not have that in Copenhagen. The money, more or less the same, total cost. But we have a car, and Bornholm is so small that there's nothing that is more than 30 minutes away. The longest you can drive on the island is about 40 minutes And that takes you from one end to the other. So everything's like 10 minutes, 15 minutes, 20 minutes, maybe half an hour away. And that's pretty wild. Now, Denmark is a tiny country. I usually describe it to, especially to Americans, saying you cannot drive more than 6 hours in Denmark, because no matter where you start, you're going to be out of the country in 6 hours. Bornholm is like the insane concentrated version of that, because no matter where you start, 40 minutes later, you are out of road because you've reached the sea. That means that everything is accessible. You get the entire island as a gift when you move here. Really, really nice. There are some minuses, of course. Not going to sugarcoat that, not at all. As with all other innovations, there are trade-offs. First off, we are no longer in an international hub. Now, due to Corona, there hasn't been a lot of business travel or a lot of travel at all. So this is not something we've really felt. But Copenhagen, where we used to live, Copenhagen is a central transport hub. From Copenhagen, you can get to many, many places in the world by air, cheaply. And we lived right next to a metro that would take us to the airport in about half an hour. So half an hour from our front door, we used to be able to step out into the Copenhagen airport. That could take us to the world. Now, it's another story. Yes, there are flights from the Bornholm airport. There is a one-gate Bornholm airport. It's a tiny place, lovely but tiny. And there's like a 35-minute, 40-minute flight to Copenhagen, and then you can go to the world. But it's very, very different from living in an international hub. We also no longer have the big city close by. There's no amusement parks here like big thing. There's no theaters. There's no 18 different specialty shops in whatever hobby you're looking for. And I know Copenhagen wasn't London. It wasn't New York. It wasn't Shanghai. But it was still a pretty big city and a capital city at that. Where this is a tiny village. There's like one electronics store. No, that's not true. There are a few electronic stores, but one is like a brand. One of the others are small, kind of handheld affairs. There are a couple of supermarkets. There's not really, it's not a big city. Not in any way. We also live on an island. 40,000 people on an island. That's not a lot of people. And that means that there are things that just aren't here. They're just not, you just don't get them because if the place isn't big enough, the 40,000 people don't merit that. And that means that no matter where you go, if you need to get these things, if you want to have these experiences, you need to go somewhere else. And that, well, that's interesting. It also means that we no longer have our network close by. And this is the toughest one by far. Saga was used to seeing her grandparents. She was parents for a day a week. And she now doesn't. She sees them when they can visit or we can visit them, which has been extra crazy due to Corona. Taking a walk with a friend for an hour, not really doable. Meeting at a cafe in town. The amount of time that we used to see, especially family, but also friends, that we no longer can because we're here. And Corona just makes it even worse. That's a crazy thing. It's a huge minus. It's something we're really feeling acutely, that it's just the three of us. From December 1st to the beginning of March, we didn't see anybody we knew. Sure, there were Zoom calls. Sure, there were phone calls. Sure, we went to the supermarket to buy groceries and said, hello, supermarket person. But we didn't talk to anyone we knew in the flesh. It was just us for 4 months. And that was pretty wild. And while we managed, of course it's a minus not having your network nearby. There have been some extras, though. Some things that weren't part of our original plan, but have just been kind of extra bonuses, extra learning that we've had from this experience so far. And we've lived here for half a year so far. One of them is that Bornholm is doing very well Corona-wise. That's not something that we had anything to do with, but it scores really, really low on the kind of the contamination, pressure numbers, yada, yada. And things have opened up sooner. And in general, it's being handled very, very well here because it's an island. It's controlled. there's a lot of things that are done right and that are easier to do here, plus a lot of the population is going along with the rules. So we're very, very lucky there. Second, Bornholm is actually an innovation test area. There's a huge project to do with recycling and making Bornholm completely waste-free by 2032, something like that. Because it's this small kind of contained unit, it's a pretty good site for innovation. And as somebody who works in innovation, it's not the worst at all. Plus, we're still renting, but we have a nice renter's agreement that says if we live here for 30 years and pay our rent, then we actually own the place, which is nice. Maybe we're not going to live here for 30 years, we'll see. But it also means that if we at some point find the money to take over the lease, then we have a kind of a first option to do that. So instead of just the money just disappearing every year, we're a little bit of it, most of it's just disappearing, but a little bit of it is being used to slowly buy the place, which is pretty nice. This is one of the nice ones. We've tested our job setup. Siri is an illustrator by trade, profession, what you want to call it. And I don't even know what I am. But we found that we can do our jobs from anywhere. We can do our jobs from home. We can do our jobs digitally. We are now fully digital and have been for a long, long while. Sure, we could do stuff live as well. I look forward to being out with clients physically and doing physical events again. But we are able to do our jobs digitally, which means that suddenly we don't have to worry about where we are. We could be living in Germany. We could be living in Scotland. We could be living in Kenya, as long as there was stable internet connection in either of those places. A huge plus has been that because we've tested this, because we've tested kind of being on our own, we're not afraid of moving further. If an opportunity pops up in Singapore, then Singapore is an option. If something happens and Sue gets a chance to land a super well-paid gig for a year in Rio de Janeiro, well, then we can actually do that. Where before, like, how will it be to be away from people, and can we manage and do, and who do. Well, now we know. Of course, it's not the same being here, being still within the Danish system as it is living in Singapore. But we've gotten to test it out just being us, and that's actually worked out fine. And that means if that opportunity comes knocking, well, it's so much easier to grab it. And it's also easy to say, let's relocate for a month. Let's go to Berlin for a month. Let's go to London for a month. Let's go somewhere on the Portuguese seaside and live for a month. Take Sago with us. It's not a problem. And before, well, we didn't know. Now we know. So what does that mean? What does it mean as an innovation story? What are takeaways? Now I've gotten to tell you a lot about my life. Thank you for listening to that. What does it mean in the broader picture? Why is this interesting to you, even if you don't care anything about kind of what's going on in my personal bubble, which is fair. First off, this is not new. These things that I'm going to tell you are not new, but this has just been another kind of proof of this. It was more scary to think about it. Oh, we had so many debates. Are we going to do it? What will it be like? And what can we return? And what's the safety net? And blah, blah, blah. And how long time do we get? All these sorts of debates. Once we were actually in it, once we were doing it, much less scary. Yes, there are problems. Yes, there are challenges. But doing it, just saying, okay, we're going, we're moving. And then we figure out things. And if it fails, then we move back. Then we've had an experience. We made sure to have a strong safety net, a place that we could go back to. We can always go back and get an apartment that's more or less the same level as the one we left. Yes, it'll have cost us a bit of money to be here, quite a bit, but it's possible to move back, and we'll now have tried this. So we decided that, and that was what actually finally pushed us over the edge, was let's stop talking about it. Let's try it. Let's see how it works. Pretty innovation-like to me, if you ask. It doesn't have to be new to others, as long as it's new to you. Moving to a new house, that's not new to me. That's not new to anybody. But moving here, moving to an island, doing it this way, looking at it not just as a new home, but also as a new combined office, well, that's new. And sure, it's not like breaking the speed of sound or the speed of light, which, according to Einstein, is hard to break. But that doesn't matter. You don't have to count innovation on some sort of the more innovative, the better. Third, there are always trade-offs. There are things that are good. There are things that are bad. No matter what sort of innovation you do in your organization, in your private life, in your career, there are going to be trade-offs. Even simple things like, yes, it's much more efficient now, but the people who were good at the old system are not good at the new one, and some of those have to be let go. Or, yes, we're growing, but it means that we're no longer the tight-knit group we were. Or, yes, we're doing this thing in a much better and safer way, but some of the thrill and some of the fun is gone. There are always trade-offs. And that brings me to number 4. Some things are very easy to measure. If we were looking at KPIs, it would be pretty easy to say 80 square meters, 132 square meters. Ka-ching! Garden, no garden. Ka-ching! These sorts of things are easy to measure. But how do we measure the fact that we're no longer near our network? Can we kind of compare that to the garden and the bigger space and the more nature sort of stuff? How do we compare those things? How do we measure without things getting incredibly abstract? Of course, we could make some sort of complex rating system and multiplication and say the garden is worth 6 points and not being near Tivoli is worth -3 points, except in winter when we could do all that. But the truth is that when you do things differently, there will be stuff that's very easy to measure, and there's stuff that's incredibly hard to measure. And when you do it in your private lives, we don't necessarily get caught up in measuring. But when it happens professionally, we like to measure. We like the numbers. You got the numbers, boss. Because we feel they prove something. And that means that we often end up comparing the things we can measure instead of the things that matter. Sometimes they're the same, but not always. And this is the last thing I want to leave you with. Well, the second last. The third last, actually. But to me, it's a pretty central point. If it hadn't been for this crisis, if it hadn't been for this virus, we wouldn't be here. We would never have made this move. Maybe someday we would have made one of those Singapore, Shanghai moves. Who knows? But this move to Bornholm? No. We wouldn't even have considered it. There's so many random factors that led to that opportunity even arising. And that means that I'm not going to say you should look for crisis. I'm just going to say when crisis hits you, look at it as a chance to do some innovation. Because if you're going to shift things around anyway, well, then you might as well not have all of them land back in their original positions. That was the third last thing. The second last is, I want to show you the old view, the old office view from our old shared office, and then the new one, which is from Sue's office, which is arguably nicer than mine, has a nicer view as well, is bigger. She got the good deal. Mine has a door, though. So you're going to see the old view and the new view, and then I'm going to say thank you, just so you get the order. This is our old view. Now, this picture is from Google. It's from Google Street View, but it could have just as well have been taken with my cell phone camera at our old place. Just a little bit higher in perspective because we lived on the second floor and this is ground floor. But this is where we came from. There was the lovely small shop that sold cars, and there was a small grocery shop, and there was a bus stop nearby, and busy street, traffic street, that sort of thing. Multi-story housing. This is the view from Sue's office here in February. Gotta admit, I love that view. Thank you.